everybody, welcome back to Think Outside the Board. I'm your host Brian Toohey, and this is the late March monthly update. Now, in these updates, the most important thing that we do is I talk to you about some currently running Kickstarters, the ones that I've picked out that I think look like the best Kickstarters that are running right now. The period for this video for the Kickstarter's funding will be from March 22nd to April 4th. That also means that the first game on the list, which is the complete collection for Everdell, probably will be completed by the time this video gets posted, but hopefully they'll have a late pledge, and it's just such a big Kickstarter. I think it's a great game, and it's something a lot of people like, so I definitely did not want to not include it on my list. But I will be profiling that game and 8 other currently running Kickstarters. After that, I will talk to you a little bit about the games that I personally pledged since the last video, the games that I acquired since the last video, and the games that I've played. And the first and fourth sections, the currently running Kickstarters and the games that I've played, those will be a little bit longer and more in depth because I have more information to communicate to you for those games. So if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing. You can also like it. And if you want to be notified whenever I publish videos in the future, you can also hit the alarm bell. Now, the reason that this video is appearing a little bit late is because we got a new puppy. And he is an amazing little dog. He looks sort of like a stuffed animal come to life. So I thought, as a bonus to people for not getting this video out before the Everdell Kickstarter ends, at the very end of this video will be a channel production update. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is kind of planned to appear video-wise in the near future. And then at the very end of the video, I'm going to have a little compilation of bonus puppy videos if you want to watch those. So if you don't want to watch this video and you just want to see the cute puppy, you can forward to the end. But if you watch the video, it will be there waiting for you. All right, let's get going with the currently running Kickstarter, starting with Everdell, the complete collection. Now, this campaign will fund on the 25th. Their funding goal was $50,000. They are up past $4.5 million right now, which is 90 times their asking price. It will deliver tentatively in March 2022. Now, I would class this game as a medium-heavy game. It's a tableau builder. It uses worker placement and resource management. There's just a lot of different things going on with the game. There are also now a bunch of expansions that you can add. Previously, they had done one for Pearlbrook. Within the last couple of years, they did a Kickstarter campaign for Spirecrest and Belfair, and now they've got this new one for Newleaf and Mistwood. Okay, so Everdell is designed by James A. Wilson, and Everdell has kind of been his big thing. He hasn't done too much else, although he did do a Kickstarter last year for a game called Flourish, which is sort of a medium light tableau builder that had players kind of dealing with both players on either side of them. Hasn't delivered yet. It looks pretty neat, and also kind of in keeping with the visual sensibility and look of Everdell. It is published by Starling Games, and Everdell is sort of their big title right now. Andrew Bosley did the art for this. He has done the art for Blood Bowl Team Manager, the card game, Kalis 1303, Citadel's Love Letter, Mission Red Planet 2nd Edition, and Tapestry. And also Dan May, who's done Black Orchestra, Nothing Personal, and A War of Whispers. Now, individually here, the Mistwood expansion adds on a spider character called Nightweave, and this expansion is specifically geared towards solo play and 2 players. So it kind of gives you an enemy to fight and kind of work together to attack, and it adds in some new mechanics and things. And that expansion is co-designed by Chrissy Pesky and Rob B. Bell. Now, the other new expansion is called Newleaf, and that will add in 4 more animal meeples, the really cute animal meeples that you can play in the game. So with Newleaf, you will get bats, cats, bees, and snails, and you'll be able to play the game as those factions from now on. It also comes with a new sideboard, and it kind of adds in some new mechanics. There's like a train mechanic with new creatures that are kind of coming to Everdell. And so there'll be new event cards, a few new forest cards, a couple of event tiles. You'll also have 59 new cards in general that you'll be adding to the deck. With this new train mechanic, you've got 32 new visitor cards, 6 ticket tiles, and 18 train car tiles. And those things together will kind of give you this new mechanic with new scoring options. Also, you can get a hardcover book in this campaign that kind of talks about the lore of the game. It's called Tales from the Green Acorn. And you can get a collector's box, which will just be big enough that you can fit everything for the original game and all 5 expansions now, if you're adding in Mistwood and Newleaf. So you'll be able to store it all in one box. So Everdell plays 1 to 4 players, but it can also play up to 6 if you're using the Belfair expansion. And for this campaign, you can get just the 2 new expansions for the $60 pledge. If you want to add in that storage box so you can kind of get everything in one box, that's going to be a $99 pledge. That'll include both expansions and the storage box. And then if you don't have Everdell before, if you have played it other places, you don't have your own copy, but you know you like it and you want to get everything, there is a complete pledge that'll run you $199. And just a reminder that the pledge prices that I'm quoting you do not include shipping. Those are different from country to country. So I want to be at least kind of consistent in the numbers that I'm telling you. So these are the pledge amounts, but you'll also have to add in the shipping to your country, wherever you may be. So again, that campaign completes funding on March 25th, which is today when I'm recording. And I assume by the time I get this edited and up, it'll be already completed, but hopefully they have a late pledge if this is something that you really want to get into and yet you somehow haven't heard about it yet. Everdell, like I said, it is going to do over 4.5 million. So people are very aware of this campaign. The last campaign, the one they did for Spirecrest and Belfair, did under 1 million. So Everdell is increasing. People are still enjoying this. More and more people want to get it and play it. And I think that when this Kickstarter delivers in March 2022, Everdell's presence in the world is only going to increase. It's only going to get more buzz. It's going to climb those board game geek ranks, and it's a favorite of a lot of people because it can be played both by lighter gamers and enjoyed by heavier gamers. I really recommend this game if it's something that you're thinking about or on the fence with. And again, hopefully they will have a late pledge if that's the case. So next up, we have Caper Europe. And the original Caper game came out a couple years ago. It's been fairly popular, and it was designed for 2 to 4 players. This version is specifically for 2. So it is designed kind of as a duel game, but I've heard that it's better than the original and that it's just kind of a step up component-wise, and it has some new art because it's being themed for Europe rather for the States. This campaign will conclude on March 26th, and their funding goal was $20,000. They are over $200,000 right now, so they're over 10 times their asking price. I would call Caper and Caper Europe a medium light game, and it will fund in September 2021. Now, this game is put out by Keymaster Games, who have done Campy Creatures and Parks in the past. It's essentially an area majority influence game, and it uses card drafting and set collection. It really reminds me a lot of one of those kind of simple war games where you've got maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 little stages around the board, and each one is kind of a battle for area control, and you're sort of fighting over these different territories individually. But in this game, it's not a war game. It's sort of themed such that you're competing for criminals and you're sending your criminals out to go on different missions and complete crimes around Europe. And so you're kind of using that theme and those mechanics to try to control different areas and get that area majority and influence. Now, this game is designed by Unai Rubio, and this game and the original Caper are pretty much his first designs. The art is by Josh Emmerich, and it's the same situation for him. He's kind of making his name with Caper as an artist. Now, the pledge levels on this one, there are 4 of them. So for $15, you can get a deck of playing cards. It's not the actual game, it's just a deck of playing cards, but it is done with the characters in the game and art by Josh Emmerich, so it has a caper feeling to it. If you want to pledge $39, you will actually get a copy of the game. So that's the lowest pledge you can do to get the game, and it comes with metal coins. For $54, you're going to get the game with the coins and the pack of playing cards. And then if you want to pledge at the $75 level, you'll get a playmat in addition to everything else, and a second set of playing cards that are called Old Bill. And again, those are done by Josh Emmerich with kind of caper characters, and it's sort of a caper themed version of Old Maid. That's why it's called Old Bill. And again, Caper Europe will complete its funding on March 26th. So you still have a day from the publishing of this video probably to go and check that out and see if that's something that you want to back. Also on March 26th, the campaign for Eagle Gryphon Games, Faux Diamonds, and Baseball Highlights, the dice game, concludes. Now, this campaign was shooting for a minimum funding goal of $15,000. Right now, they're at $22,000, so that's about 1.5 times their asking funding. Faux Diamonds is a trick-taking game that has a little more going on mechanically. There's an ability for players at the end of a hand, if they can't play a trick, to get a bonus ability, and then the players who win the trick get a bonus ability, and there's a few other times in the game that you'll be able to activate bonus abilities. So it's kind of like a card game you might play with a deck of cards, but a little amped up. And it's probably a really, really good kind of gateway game, maybe for people, maybe older relatives who haven't really gotten into the world of sort of modern board gaming. This will kind of introduce them to some of those mechanics from just a normal card playing game. So that's Faux Diamonds, and that plays 2 to 6 players. Now, art on here is by Alex Colby. And then Baseball Highlights, the dice game, is a dice rolling roll and write game. And it's sort of a dice rolling roll and write version of Baseball Highlights 2045. And both of these games are designed by Mike Fitzgerald, who pretty much made his name doing Baseball Highlights 2045 and Football Highlights 2052. And again, it's being published by Eagle Gryphon Games, and they have done things like Railways of the World, Age of Steam, all the very nice deluxe Vital Lacerda games. And then last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, they did a deluxe version of Rococo that was similarly produced and packaged as those Lacerda games. For my money, they make some of the nicest produced games in the business. Now, these games are also co-designed by Ian Sebastian Bach, who has been working with Mike Fitzgerald on the Baseball Highlights and Football Highlights games. William Bricker, who has done some of the Tiny Epic games like Tiny Epic Galaxies and Tiny Epic Kingdoms. He also did the art on the previous version of Kanban, so not the one that just came out that was called Kanban EV, but the previous version called Kanban Drivers Edition. And he also did art on Baseball Highlights 2045. There's also art by Garrett Kaida, who's worked on Football Highlights 2052, Return to the Dark Tower, and the new Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition game that just kickstarted maybe a month or two ago. There's also the artwork of Franz Vohwinkel, who has been in the business back since Magic the Gathering. He worked on that. He's done Clank in Space, Puerto Rico, The Quest for El Dorado, Targi, and Dominion Intrigue. Now, there's 4 different price pledges on this one. For $24, you can get either Faux Diamonds or Baseball Highlights, the dice game. For $33, you'll get Baseball Highlights, the dice game, and Football Highlights, the dice game, which is kind of being done as an expansion for Baseball Highlights. So you won't get it if you pledge at the $24 level, but if you pledge at the $33, that will be included. Then at the $47 price range, you'll get both games. So you'll get Faux Diamonds and you'll get Baseball Highlights, the dice game. And then if you want to pledge at the $55 level, you'll get the Football Highlights, the dice game thrown in as well. And again, this campaign will conclude on March 26th. Then on March 30th, we've got a game called So You've Been Eaten, period. And it is sort of a very unique game. You're playing a miner in a space setting, or you're playing a monster that has eaten the miner. And you can play this either 1 or 2 player. If you're playing it as a 1-player game, obviously it's a solo game, and you can play either as the miner battling the monster or the monster battling the miner. Now, if you're playing the miner, you're going to be using a dice rolling mechanic, and if you're playing as the monster, you're going to be using a card hand management mechanic. It also has the very odd quality, I guess, of being the only game that I've heard of published that has a 0-player count, because you can have the miner and the monster fight against each other, both as kind of an AI character. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it's a talking point amongst the games. So there you have it. If you want to watch a game be played and not have anything to do with it, you can do it here. For those who'd want to entertain themselves in an odd way, maybe once or twice. But you can also play this game, obviously, a 2-player, a duel game with 1 player playing the miner and the other player playing the monster. Now, this game is being published by Luda Creations. They've done a few games. They're kind of slowly building up their name, but they haven't done anything that's kind of really bowled me over yet. They did a game called Crisis, On the Underground, London, Berlin, Mr. Cabbage Head's Garden, Redacted, and then a game that I actually own called And Then We Held Hands, which also has a period at the end of it, which is kind of odd, but there you go. Now, this game has a funding goal of $10,000. They're currently at $280,000, which means they're at 28 times their initial funding goal. I'd probably class this game as a light to medium light game, and it will deliver in October of 2021. It is designed by Scott Alms, who's done all of the Tiny Epic games. He kind of has a little cottage industry going, putting out these tiny epic games. He also did Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Harbor, and then this year, Almanac, The Dragon Road, which has been getting some really positive reviews. And then the art on this is Kwanchai Maria, who I love. I think he's one of the best illustrators in the business right now. He's done things like Dinosaur Island, Cryptid, the whole Catacombs series, including the Catacombs and Castles games. And we're going to be talking about those in just 1 minute. And what else did he do? Under Falling Skies, In the Hall of the Mountain King, Pret-a-Porter, the new version, and the new version of Sidereal Confluence. So you know with him on the art, this thing's going to look pretty sick and cool. And it's going to have this sort of stylized, somewhat blocky, sci-fi themed art. There's 2 price points for this, just 2. It's a smaller game. The premium version is going for $39. And then if you want to upgrade it to the $49 version, you can pledge at that level. And that will include triple layered boards, some upgraded tokens, and 3 tuck boxes that you can keep different cards in, as well as a cardboard dice tower. So you've got 2 different pledge levels for that. It's probably a great game right now when people are still isolating because of the pandemic, because it's solo and 2-player game. So it's the pandemic sweet spot. Now on March 31st, the campaign for Catacombs and Castles 2nd edition concludes. This one has a minimum funding goal of $32,000. They're currently at $79,000, which is 2.5 times their funding goal. Catacombs and Castles I think it's a little bit into the medium light range, just out of light into the medium light range. It's published by Elzra Games, and Catacombs and Castles, that whole series that's what they do. That's pretty much all they do. And it's designed by Aaron West, and again, this is what he does. He is the maestro of the Catacombs and Castles games. And if you don't know what these games are, you haven't played them before, they are essentially flicking dexterity games with a fantasy theme. So you're going into this kind of fantasy setting, you're fighting. The way that you can attack and the way that you move is going to be determined by cards. And then you'll utilize those cards to go down onto the game board and then kind of flick pieces and fight. The thing that pushes it into the medium level range are those cards, which give it a little bit more complexity than your average flicking game where you're literally just kind of flicking pieces around. And the art for this, again, is by Kwanchai Maria. So, I mean, these games, I'm not really a dexterity gamer, but if I was going to play dexterity games, I probably would go for this. And I think this campaign is a great time to jump into it. And you'll see why when we go over the pledge levels, because there are a lot of pledge levels and there's opportunities for you to get anything you might want, including everything. And I think when you have a game like this that is that popular and there's been that much material kind of made for it before, I always think a campaign like this where you can kind of just get everything all together is awesome. So if this is something that you've played before, you have a little bit of it, you've played it, at somebody else's copy, this is your opportunity to kind of just go crazy and go all in and get everything. Now, Catacombs and Castles plays 2 to 8 players. There's a couple different modes for it. So you can either play in a cooperative team mode. So you're playing kind of teams against teams. And if you're doing that, you can play up to 8 players. So it's, kind of teams of 2, and you'll have up to 4 teams playing. You can also play this as a cooperative / one versus many game. So what that means is you can play up to 4 players working together, fighting against a kind of overseer boss monster player. So you're going to have one player controlling the big bad monster and up to 4 players working together to fight that player. Now, let's talk about pledge levels on this. The first pledge level is a $39 pledge, and that's really just an upgrade pledge. So this is something that you would pledge if you already had the first edition, but you wanted to upgrade the components of your version to the new version's components. And it's also going to include upgrades for some of the expansions, Keystones and Keeps, and Siege Defender. And it also includes a playmat. So if you have the first edition and you kind of want to upgrade to all the second edition stuff, boom, $39. Then, as a separate kind of pledge level for $47 is something called the Black Box expansion, and you'll get a playmat with that, like a special playmat just for that version with that. And that version includes a double-sided playmat, so there's 2 sides to it, 2 different maps, and then alternate cards, basically for a lot of different scenarios in the original game and the different expansions. So it'll give you the ability to kind of go back and play all of the content with new cards, new characters, new creatures to fight against. So it'll definitely just kind of expand the life of your game. For $51, you can get the new standard second edition, and that comes with its own playmat as well. So all the playmats I'm mentioning, they're all different from kind of pledge to pledge. And if you order some of these later pledges I'm about to talk about, they will come with the playmats for each thing. Okay, so the $86 pledge level will get you that upgrade pack. That was the first thing I talked about, and the black box. So you'll kind of get all that stuff together. If you pledge at the $87 level, that'll give you the standard edition and the playmat, but add on the big box and all the upgrade stuff. Now we're still going. There's 5 pledge levels left. So for $104, you're going to get something called the Ice Box, which just has more content, more kind of content thrown in. For $134, you're going to get that $87 package with the black box stuff. For $270, you're going to get the $104 package with the black box stuff. So those 2 levels take previous levels and then add on that black box package. And then for $349, you're going to get all of those things and some of the other expansions that have been put out previously. And then if you really want to go whole hog, there is a pledge level for $388 that includes even more expansion content. I'm not sure if it's everything made for the game to date, but I think it probably is. You may want to double check that, but I believe it is kind of everything Castles and Catacombs to date. So it doesn't include the shipping, but if you do not have Castles and Catacombs and you want everything for this thing, it's going to be $388 plus shipping. And again, this campaign will complete on February 31st, and it delivers in January 2022. Also concluding on March 31st is Eternal Palace. Now this is sort of a dice rolling and worker placement game. I've heard of it referred to as a Kingsburg killer, but essentially what you're going to be doing is rolling dice and then kind of placing those dice using different tracks all around the board and building a painting. And it's got this kind of interesting mechanic where you've got a little player board area, and as you do this, you'll earn different little cardboard overlays, and you can kind of build up this painting filled with multiple levels. And essentially every level of the painting will be a point. The painting thing kind of reminds me of Bob Ross, The Art of Chill, or Kanagawa, but it also has that dice rolling, dice placement, Kingsburg-like element to it. So it's kind of a fusion of a painting game with a Kingsburgian dice rolling, dice placement game. Now it's being put out by Alley Cat Games, who've done titles like Dice Hospital, Chocolate Factory, Welcome to Dino World, and Tangaru. And it is designed by Stephen Aramini, who his big claim to fame so far has been a couple of Button Shy games, some of those small wallet games that they make. Actually, two of the most famous of those games, Circle the Wagons and Sprawlopolis. So this is kind of his entry into something beyond those very small, simpler wallet card games. And on art for this one, you've got Jackie Davis, who is a fantastic artist. She's done Colosseum, Ex Libris, Stockpile, and a couple Stonemaier games, Euphoria and Viticulture. And then it's also got art by Quentin Regnis, who so far to date has only done a game called Netatanka, which is a Native American themed worker placement game. So they're on the art. They both are really, really talented artists. And there are two pledge levels for this one. There's a $46 pledge level that will get you the base game. And then there is a $58 deluxe edition, which includes two kind of mini expansions and 4 little miniatures. And the reason for those miniatures is that as you are doing things in this game on the board, you're going to be sort of recreating some physical buildings. And so if you get the deluxe version with the miniatures, then once those miniatures are completed, you'll be able to put this kind of miniature version of the building out on the board that looks really nice. Although, keep in mind that the version that they show of the miniature buildings on the Kickstarter campaign, they're all painted, but they don't come painted. They come unpainted. So just know that, because they don't show versions of these miniatures unpainted. So don't assume that you're getting the painted version, because you're not. Anyway, Eternal Palace will conclude on March 31st, and I don't think I mentioned it previously, but it plays 1 to 5, so it does have a solo mode. Also on the 31st is Valeria Card Kingdoms, and there's a new cooperative expansion that's being offered through this campaign called Darksworn. Valeria Card Kingdoms is a lighter game. It's a tableau builder. The original game plays 1 to 5 players, so again, it has a solo element to it. And the new Darksworn expansion plays 2 to 5. That's because it's a cooperative, so you need at least 2 people to play it cooperatively. Presumably, if you really wanted to, you could still play it solo and just kind of control multiple characters and do a two-hander, but ideally it's designed to be played from 2 to 5. So the funding goal for this one was $65,000. They're currently sitting at about $140,000, or about 2 times their funding goal. This is a light game. It's a pretty light game. It's essentially dice rolling and resource management, and then tableau building. But there's been so much content in this game in the past that there are a lot of expansions and things that you can kind of add to it that will give you additional mechanics. Now, it's going to deliver in October 2021. It is being published by Daily Magic Games, and this is a company where they're focusing mainly on one thing, which are these Valeria games, and they've also done a game called Chocolatiers. Now, Daily Magic is sort of the shingle for Isaiah Vallejo, and again, this is what he's been working on. So he's done all the Valeria games as well as Chocolatiers. And the art on this is handled by the Miko. That's his nickname that he uses, because it's his actual name is a little unwieldy, but it's Mihailo Dmitrievsky. And I'm sure you've seen his art before. He does kind of all of the Garphill games art, like the of the North Sea and the of the West Kingdom series. That would be Raiders, Explorers, and Shipwrights of the North Sea, and Architects, Paladins, and Viscounts of the West Kingdom. He's also done art for a lot of the Final Fantasy games like Rise to Nobility and Cavern Tavern. So he's great. I love the Miko. I think he has some of the best art out there. And his art for Valeria actually looks a little bit more subtle and nuanced than some of his other art. It's like a little less cartoony. It's still cartoonish, but there's like one or two extra levels of realism in the cartooniness of his art. Okay, so for this campaign, as I said, it's kind of focusing on this new cooperative element. So the game previously had only been available to play as a competitive game. Now, if you just pledge for that new cooperative expansion, it's called Darksworn, that's going to be a $29 pledge. If you do not own Valeria Card Kingdoms and you kind of just want to get the original base game, you can do that here. You can get the second edition. That's going to be a $30 pledge. If you pledge at the $59 level, you'll get both things together. So you'll get the kind of new version of the base game and you'll get the cooperative expansion for it. And that's it. That's all you can get. So you can't get the other expansions that are out there right now through the pledge levels, but there are a few things you can add on. So for $19, you can add on a double-sided playmat. For a $29 add-on, you can get a bigger box, kind of a big storage box that will hold everything kind of made to date if you are picking up that other stuff or you already own it. And there's some stuff that comes with that as well. There's some dice packs and some mini expansions. And then you can also add on two of the kind of bigger, more well-known expansions. One of them is called Flames and Frost. That one will cost $20. And another one called Crimson Skies, which is $29. And they both kind of add on different mechanics. If you want to sort of make your version of Valeria a little bit more complex and have more things going on. And again, you're going to have the ability to play all of this cooperatively with using Darksworn. So it concludes on March 31st. It ships in October 2021. A 1 to 4 player roll and write game called Three Sisters. It's by a new game company. It's called Motor City Dreamworks, but it's the company for Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle. And they've made games in the past. In fact, they've made one of the best, most highly regarded roll and write games out there, Fleet the Dice game. They've also designed Fleet, the original game, and Wasteland Express delivery service. So while the company itself is new, the designers definitely have been around a little bit and know what they're doing. So the fact that it's a roll and write game when they made Fleet the Dice game, I don't think you need to worry about this one the way you might about another company putting out a Kickstarter for the very first time. Like, these guys have experience and they know for the most part what they're doing. And that is Ben Pinchback and Matt Riddle. The art on this one is being handled by Marlies Barons, and she's pretty new to the business. She's done a game called Ortus. So also on art for this game is Beth Sobel, who's a fantastic artist. She's done artwork for games like Arboretum, Calico, Between Two Cities, and the Stonemaier games Wingspan and Viticulture. Both versions of Viticulture, in fact, the original game and the Essential Edition. She's so good. She makes me want to buy a game just because she has the art on it. That's how good her art is. So this is sort of a backyard farming themed roll and write game. Now there's only one pledge level for this one, and it's pretty low. So if you're trying to get a fun, good little game with solid choices, it's not going to take a huge bite out of your wallet. The Kickstarter edition for this one, which I think just has sort of an upgraded first player mark, I think that's the only thing that's exclusive to this Kickstarter. But it is a $29 pledge, and that'll get you the whole thing. And again, it's a 1 to 4 player game, so you can play it solo. I think as far as the complexity on this one goes, we have to look to Fleet the Dice games. It's the same designers, and that game is medium heavy. So I'm assuming that Three Sisters is going to end up being medium heavy as well. Now, this campaign is going to conclude on April 1st. Their funding goal was $18,000. Right now they're at $65,000, which is about 3.5 times their funding goal. And it will deliver in September 2021. Now on April 3rd, the 2 to 4 player game Night Market will complete its funding. They had a minimum funding of $20,000. Right now they're sitting at about $43,000, so they're over the 2x mark. And I'd put this game around the medium level to medium heavy range. It's hard to tell right now, but it's going to be somewhere in that kind of medium range. And it's going to deliver in April of 2022. It's essentially a worker placement resource management game. It's being published by Talon Strike Studios. They're a smaller game company. They're still kind of growing. They've done Vinyl, Winterborn, which actually looks really great, a game called Camp Pinetop, and a Kickstarter called Public Market that was out last year, so that hasn't delivered yet. But Public Market looked really good. I almost backed that one. It's being designed by Adam Zwain, and this is his first published game. And it's got art by Jason Washburn, who seems to be kind of an in-house illustrator for Talon Strikes, or at least an illustrator that they go to constantly. They must really like him because he has worked on all 4 of the games that I mentioned that they've published in the past. And it also has art from James Churchill, who's done a couple games that haven't actually come out yet, but they've been on Kickstarter in the last year. One was called Feed the Kraken, and one was called Legacies. And for this one, there are 3 different pledge levels that you can pledge. There's the $50 pledge level, which will get you the game. Then there is a $75 pledge level, which will add on some custom components and a solo mode. And then for $115, you can get all that stuff plus 4 mini expansions and a festival pack, which will include kind of different setups that you can do in the game and different scenarios. So it kind of gives you some more variability and some more ways to play that game. Now, again, that's going to finish funding on April 3rd, and it will deliver tentatively in April of 2022. That brings us to the end of the currently running Kickstarter section. So I actually backed a handful of games since the last video, more than I usually do. I backed 5 games this period, although a couple of them are expansions, so they're kind of smaller Kickstarter campaigns. The first game that I backed was Aeon's End Legacy of Gravehold. And Aeon's End is my favorite deck builder out there. It's just amazing. Probably second up might be Thunderstone Quest. Maybe the most popular, best-selling version of Aeon's End is the Legacy game. And this is a sequel to that Legacy game. There are 6 different versions of Aeon's End out there, or 6 different kind of sequels. I'm pretty sure that you can play any of these 6 games alone. If you just want to go out and pick one up, I'm pretty sure that you can just play any one. But if you want to play them in order, and they have a storyline that evolves kind of from game to game, then you're going to play the base game first, and then War Eternal, and then there's the Legacy game. And then after that, they did the New Age and Outcasts, and now they have this sequel Legacy game. So there's a couple ways that someone could play this. They could play, one Legacy game, then the other Legacy game. But because of the storyline, there are things that happen in Outcast and the New Age story-wise that will kind of appear in the new Legacy game. So you definitely can play all those games and have this kind of ongoing storyline. I've also heard that the Legacy game is so good and it teaches you the game so well that it's a good starting point. So you could start with that first Legacy game and then play Outcasts and New Age and go on to the second Legacy game. But there are 2 previous versions. There's the base game and there's War Eternal. Some of the storylines that happen in those games will find their way into the Legacy game. So there's different options in how you can play this. You could start with the Legacy game and start from there. Or you could just go all the way back to the beginning, start with the base game, play that, play War Eternal, and then play the Legacy game, which is supposed to be really good at teaching you. But playing Aeon's End is such a fun and attractive experience that I don't think you're going to suffer any kind of negativity, kind of slowing down a little bit and restarting up with that Legacy game. In fact, the fact that it kind of brings other storylines into play in Legacy, I think, will add things. So don't feel hesitant about going back to the beginning, starting there, and then playing the Legacy game. There's definitely different ways that you can play it, and each game stands on its own. So you don't need to have that storyline kind of through your entire play experience. You don't need to go through all 6 games, but you can if you want. And if you do, you will have kind of an ever-evolving story, which is definitely a hallmark of the series. And I love it. I just love deck building in general, and Aeon's End to me has some really interesting mechanics in the way that they do it, the way you can kind of choose to discard your cards, and that will determine how they come back into play later. And the way they have these kind of portals with these little four-sided cards, and as you play, you find ways to kind of turn them, and then they open up new avenues for you to use powers and more powerful powers as the game goes on. It's sort of all about upgrading your character as you're playing. And from game to game, it does that as well. So it's a very, very sort of deeply thematic experience. And there's this kind of rich narrative woven throughout the entire series. So for me, Aeon's End, a new legacy version of Aeon's End, it was kind of a must-back for me. Now, I also backed Meeples Monsters, which was a smaller game. It reminds me a lot of Belfort, this kind of simple game, more on the medium light end where you're kind of building buildings and scoring points. But what makes Meeples Monsters different is that it's also a bag builder. So you're going to be getting different kind of meeples out of your bag as you're playing and using them almost like Orléans, but an easier version of Orléans that feels more like Belfort, if either of those games mean anything to you. But I like AEG. I like most of what AEG does. They're the company that made Meeples Monsters, and it had a kind of a smaller price tag on it, and it emulates some other games that I like and enjoy, and it's something that I think I can get played and bring to the table with lighter gamers and more casual gamers. It was something I was very curious about, and I thought I wanted to get and eventually look at for this channel. I also backed the new Root Kickstarter, which I love Root. It's kind of, I have to back everything Root. And this one is called the Marauder expansion. It just adds in some new factions, a whole bunch of new things. I don't know too much about it yet, just because it's just an easy back for me, and I kind of want to explore it when it comes. I also backed the new expansion for Roman Roll, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in the played section because I did play that this period. So it's just kind of a little expansion that adds on some more mechanics. And then finally, I backed a game called Stroganov, which was this really beautiful art, sort of a worker placement game set in Siberia and Russia. And definitely the art style kind of helped push me towards backing that one. It's just a really, really pretty game. And I believe if you're a fan of Man vs. Meeple, it's on Jeremy Salinas' list as his most anticipated games of the year. So those are the 5 games that I backed this period. I only acquired one game this period, which is Venice from Braincrack. And it was just a really colorful game. I really loved Braincrack's previous game called Ragusa, in what's sort of becoming a series. Now, that series has games by different designers and art by different artists. Each game is being produced with a similar style of graphic design. The next one coming up is called Florence, and I think that's going to be launching in the next couple of months. I'd like to talk more about Venice, but I'm going to do it in the played games section. Okay, so this period I played 5 different games. The first one is Arkham Horror, the card game, and I actually played it 4 times, or 4 scenarios if you want to count it that way. So my fiance Kristen and I played the base game, which is 3 scenarios. It's called Night of the Zealot. And then we played Carnival of Horrors, which I found out is the most difficult expansion that has been published to date for Arkham Horror. And it was an interesting scenario because Kristen is not the hugest fan of Arkham Horror, the card game, nor does she like punishing difficult games, where you have to play them 10 times to try to win once. But it was my birthday, so she played with me, and I had a lot of fun. The base game that we played, we actually used a couple of characters that were not the recommended characters, and we played on standard, which I think is a mistake because Arkham Horror is so difficult that I don't really think there's much of a need to play in anything other than easy mode. Now, it does come with 4 difficulty levels. There's easy, standard, I think difficult, and then something called maybe nightmare mode or extreme. Let's go with nightmare mode because that sounds awful. And I sort of imagine that playing nightmare mode would be you get to take a couple of turns and then you'd be dead. Because the standard game, the one that we played, combined with kind of the randomness of the game itself, because you're kind of drawing tokens out of a bag. Most of those tokens are negative. I think in a standard game, it's something like a 50-50 draw. And in the easy game, it's maybe like 2/3 of the time you'll be able to, pull a token that gives you success. So as you go into the harder modes, the hard and the difficult, that chance for success in the tokens that you're pulling out of the bag is going to decrease even more. But we played on standard, which, as I said, I think was maybe a bit of a mistake. It made it a little bit more difficult, and we just got bad luck randomness. So we just got destroyed. We got absolutely destroyed in the game, and I think we're going to go back later at some point and play it with the 2 recommended characters and play it on easy, because Kristen does like these games if we're just focused on the story and the narrative and things like that. I think she really enjoys that. She just doesn't want to have a miserable time playing it. So at some point we'll go back, we'll play it on easy mode, and maybe we'll play things on easy mode, other expansions on easy mode in the future. I do have a lot of these one-off expansions, and my reason for doing that is that I wanted to sort of play some different scenarios and get an idea of the game before I added on any of the bigger expansions. And I think what I found, even though we had such a difficult experience with the base and with the Carnival of Horrors one-off, is that I really love this game. I really do like it, as sort of punishing and repetitive as it could be. I like the puzzle of the game. I like the characters. I like the theme and the story, and the artwork is great. And it has this sense of foreboding, and I just like the stories, and I'm really looking forward to at some point playing at least one of the bigger expansions where you go through 6 different scenarios. So every time you complete a scenario, you get to change your deck based on experience that you earned in that scenario. So as you go kind of from scenario to scenario in one adventure, your character and your deck will become more and more powerful. And what I learned is that the best way to play Carnival of Horrors, because that scenario is so difficult, is to go into it maybe after the 5th or 6th scenario in a larger expansion. Once your deck is powerful, it'll somewhat, balance out the difficulty, the extreme difficulty of the Carnival of Horrors scenario. So I do look forward to playing it again, and I'm probably going to bake it into like a longer expansion. But I think for me, this is a game that I realized I do want to keep playing, even if it's just me playing it solo, or maybe finding another friend and we get together once in a while and just, play through some of the kind of bigger expansions. So I do think I'll be keeping it long term. That's probably a bad sign for Marvel Champions, the card game, because I don't really see the need to have both of those. I do own both right now. So I intend to give Marvel Champions some play and see how much I like it, but I think it's very likely that I'll end up selling that and just kind of focusing on Arkham Horror, the card game. Both of them have a lot of expansion content, and they're constantly being produced. So I think to try to keep up with both of those games, it's somewhat redundant, and I also think it's just too much to try to deal with. So I think for me, long-term, Arkham Horror, the card game, is going to be the way I'm going to go. So I had a really good time with it, and I'm really thankful that Kristen agreed to play it with me for my birthday. Now, we also played Railways of the World, the Mexico map, and I love train games. I love Railways of the World. I love Age of Steam, and Railways of the World is a little easier than Age of Steam. It's a little lighter complexity-wise, and the reason for that is that in Railways of the World, there's a bidding phase, but all you're bidding on is first player. So you're not going to paint yourself into a corner too much. You're just going to do the bidding phase. Whoever wins it is first player for that round. If no one bids, then whoever was first player will continue to be first player. But if you play Age of Steam, which is sort of a more complex version of the same game, there's a bidding phase in that game. And when you then, you win the phase and you're taking turns kind of in player order, when one player does something, that means that the other players cannot do that thing for that round. So that game is a lot more complex. It's kind of a little bit of a puzzle box, and you can have entire rounds where if you don't have the money to bid what you need to bid, or there's a bidding war and you kind of don't want to get caught up in that, and you end up going last in like a larger player count game, there may be nothing that you can do that round. You may sort of get painted in a corner. And I think it promotes analysis paralysis, and it can lead to players, sometimes if they don't plan well, feeling a little excluded. So I think Railways World is sort of a nicer, friendlier version of Age of Steam. It's a little easier to teach. It's a little easier to play. It also has a lot of event cards that come out, and those are fun. They give you kind of little bonus things that you can do. And I like building train tracks, and I like delivering cubes around. There's something about that for whatever reason I just find very, very fun. So we played the 2-player version for my birthday. And again, we're still self-isolating, so it's just the 2 of us. So we played on the Mexico map, which is a smaller map. I just had a great time with it. I love it. So I would recommend that to anyone. There's a new 10th anniversary edition out there. There are a lot of maps that you can buy, and the maps kind of cater to different player counts. Most of the maps, I think, are sort of 2 to 4, but they have this thing that you can play if you take the eastern half of the United States map and the western United States map and you put them together. There's a thing called the transcontinental variant. So you're playing on 2 already big maps pushed together, which means that you've got this giant, huge table hogging map. And that version of the game, that kind of double boarded monstrosity, that can play up to 6 players. I really would like to play that someday, although I think this game with 6 players, it sounds like an all-day game, a 4 to 6 hour game maybe, which sounds awesome for me. So someday I will get that played, probably post-vaccine. Then we also played Roman Roll, and Roman Roll is interesting. We had an interesting experience with it. It is probably the most complex roll and write game out there. And you're going to be drawing on a main board, sort of drawing and creating buildings. You're also going to be drawing on a giant player board, which keeps track of like 10 different things, different mechanics, different resources, different beings that you can hire. There's soldiers and senators, and they do different things in the game. And mechanically, I really, really like the game. I don't know that it needs to be a roll and write game. I think that it might be a little bit easier to manage and less fiddly if it was just a Euro game and you were tracking your resources with cubes or some kind of system. And maybe you had tiles or something that you placed out to kind of create the building. Because when you're all drawing, and we played a 2-player game, so it was just 2 colors of marker on the main board. But even then, it gets a little hard to read and kind of congested. And I can only imagine playing it with 4 players and kind of having 4 different colors on the main board. But and then when you're done, there's a lot to erase. I mean, those erasers for this thing are going to get eaten up pretty fast for all the markers. And then when you kind of erase the markings, it ends up making kind of like little physical debris that you sort of need to get rid of, which is normally not that big a deal. But when there's that much writing in a game all over the main board and all over the player boards, there's a lot of sort of slough at the end of the game that you need to clean up and deal with. But I like the game mechanically. I guess that question is, should it have been a Euro game with, physical components and not this roll and write game? And I don't know. I think in some ways it would be easier to deal with and a little cleaner. And I do wonder about, the future of these boards being written on them over a long period of time, and the pens, because you're doing so much writing, these pens are going to eventually sort of wear out. But I did like the game. It's you're doing a few different things. You're building buildings on the main board. And as you do that, they will give you sort of different powers. And then there are these territories beneath the main board where you can do things like build settlements or build roads. And all of these different things will give you different scoring abilities. So this is the sort of game where you've got, 5, 6, 7, maybe as you throw in different expansions, 8, 9, 10 different scoring systems. And then your gameplay revolves around maximizing the different scoring system based on what you're doing in that game, what your opponents are doing, what your sort of variable player powers are. And as you do things and kind of build up certain kind of powers over the course of the game, what caters to that. So there's a lot of good choices to be made. There are ways, I think, if something isn't going your way, you're doing one thing and it's not working out, you can kind of pivot and do something else. And I really like it when games give you enough scoring systems to allow you to do that. If you get to a point where you realize like, wow, this thing I'd sort of been pursuing scoring wise isn't going to work for me, or everyone else is competing with that as well. So now I want to kind of change tactics and go over here and focus on that. You can do that in this game. So yeah, I went in for the expansion, Gladiators, I talked about in the back section, and we'll see when that eventually delivers how that expands the game. But this is a game that I am actually really excited to play at higher player counts with some of my friends and gaming groups once we're all vaccinated. I think a lot of people are going to like it, and it's going to be very kind of fun, lively game when it's being played. There's a lot of interactivity, I think, between the players in this one and kind of what they're doing. So I enjoyed it. I would recommend it, but I think, if you're thinking about getting this game, you should think about the whole kind of Euro game versus roll and write, if this is the roll and write that you want. As I mentioned, it is a heavier roll and write. So if someone is coming into this and they just want something like Welcome to, something very simple, this may be more than they're expecting. So definitely take a look at it, watch a review or a gameplay video and see if it's right for you. But I loved it. I'm also, I love heavier games in general. So this kind of operated in this little Venn diagram overlap that I really appreciated, even with the fiddliness of the roll and write element in this game. And there is no Euro version of this game. This is it. So if you do want the game, if you think it's something that appeals to you, you will be getting the roll and write version. Now, it'd be interesting if, a couple of years from now, they came out with a non-roll and write Euro version. If they ever did that, I might recommend getting that version, but who knows until that happens. Okay, I also played Venice this period. And Venice, I mentioned, that's the only game that I acquired this period. The Kickstarter arrived. And it is by Braincrack Studios. They previously did Ragusa. Ragusa, I love. And I think it's a game that, one of those games that kind of slots into that section where you can play it with gamers who like to play lighter games, and you can play it with gamers who like to play heavier games. And I really love games that kind of can bring all gamers together, where it's easy enough to teach and play that, pretty much anyone's going to be able to grok it. So it's also a game that heavier, more complex gamers can play and not be bored by. And I really love games like that, where you can kind of just bring everybody together and everybody can kind of have a good time playing the same game, no matter what kind of complexity game they enjoy playing. So, big advertisement for Ragusa. It's good. Now, Venice, I have more mixed feelings about, and there are three sort of problems I have with the game right now. It's colorful. It's really bright. I mean, it's gorgeous to look at. I like all the kind of wooden pieces. I like the kind of theme that you're in Venice. You're these gondoliers, and they've got these cool little plastic boats that you're kind of piloting around the canals, and then you're activating different buildings with assistance. And when you go by these buildings on your boats, you get to trigger those buildings. It's just, mechanically, I really like what it's doing. My problem with the game is threefold. Okay, so first of all, it's super problematically fiddly. And what I mean by that is the boats are plastic. They're a little bit warped. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not. It's not bad, but it's just a little bit of a warp to the. I think it's intentional to give it a little bit of a shape. But the problem is the gondolier doesn't really sit in the boat very well, and it falls over a lot. It's kind of a stupid little problem, but it becomes a big problem in this game because on most turns you're going to move your gondolier from one boat to another boat. So you have two boats you're controlling, and you're going to generally be switching that gondolier to the other boat every turn. And so every turn you move this gondolier and you place him in the boat, he's going to fall over, and then you have to pick up the boat to move, and that's going to fall over. The boat is also designed to carry up to 5 little resource cubes, and it's got some weird kind of a scoring in the bottom of the boat, but the cubes don't really fit or arrange that well. I mean, they fit, but it has these kind of little markings in the bottom of the boat that makes it hard to move the cubes around. So combined, that's just kind of a lot of fiddliness for this game. And I think if you really love the game, if you look at the game and you like the gameplay, I wonder if you might want to consider just kind of 3D printing your own boats to kind of fix that issue. Now, my second issue with the game is that there are these tiles on the board that represent buildings, and they're randomly distributed. So they're not even going to be in the same place every game. And these tiles tend to have they do. They have the name of the building printed on the top of the tile. So when you're looking at this and these tiles end up accumulating 1, 2, 3, 4 assistants on them, you can't really read the name of the buildings. And you need to read the name of the buildings, especially if you're playing at, let's say, the 2-player variant where you're controlling kind of these AI players and you're drawing cards that are telling you what building to send the AI boats to. And you need to be able to clearly read those building tiles. So I think one way they could have fixed that was to maybe put the name of the building on perhaps all 4 sides of the tile, or at least on the bottom. Because if it was on the bottom, you could see it, as you're looking at the tile. Although if you're sitting on all 4 sides of the board, if you're playing with 4 players, I think it would have been helpful to have that building name on each of the 4 sides of the tile. But they didn't do that. C'est la vie. So that's my second issue with the game. The third thing is the fact that in our 2-player game, we liked it. We were enjoying the game, but we felt like the game should be ending soon. And it's not... I mean, there is some stuff going on mechanically in the game. I don't know if I'd class it as medium heavy. It's somewhere sort of on the borderline of medium light and medium heavy. And I think we were both enjoying the mechanics. We found it very fun. But we got to the point that we thought for that sort of game, that complexity level of game, it felt like it was time for the game to be wrapping up. But the end game triggers took a lot of work. So there was... maybe the last half of the game where it felt like the game was kind of dragging and dragging as we were struggling to make it end. And I'm not sure if that was sort of unique to our game. So I am interested to play it again at 2 players to see if that situation duplicates itself. And I'm also curious to play it at 3 and 4 players and see how, or if that happens at a higher player count. But I do really, really want to like the game. I think it, like as I said, the mechanics in it I find compelling, and it's a pretty game to look at. It's got a lot of bright, brilliant colors, and I like the chunky wooden pieces. I even like the boats. I just wish that they would work a little better and that things would fit in them better and not constantly fall out of them. So it's a game that I really, really want to like, and I'm kind of on the fence with it right now. I think I'm going to need to play it more before I kind of decide whether it's a game that I want to ultimately keep. There's also another game out there that I did not back that had a Kickstarter last year called Tungaru. And it's actually being produced by Alley Cat Games. So at some point in the future, I'd be curious to get my hands on a copy of Tungaru and kind of see how they compare, and if Tungaru plays any more smoothly than Venice. Although, as I said, I still haven't completely made up my mind on Venice. I'm just wondering if maybe Tungaru kind of does what Venice does, but does it better. And that's just going to be a question, I think, for the future for myself. And finally, we played Yokohama Duel Deluxified, which took a little while to come in. It was a Kickstarter that was fairly delayed, even before all the kind of pandemic shipping issues. I'd never played the original Yokohama, so I can't compare it to that game. What I can say is that the Deluxified version, which is a 2-player duel game, is very tight. It's very, very tight. So as you're doing things in the game, you're going to constantly be blocking the other player. Generally, my fiance and I don't love games that are that tight. It can be frustrating sometimes if you're constantly being blocked out of what you want to do and kind of having to recalculate and often do things that you don't want to do. And that happened in this game quite often, but we both really enjoyed the game anyway. And I think that speaks a lot to the game itself. Once I eventually do play the original game, I think I'll have to kind of decide whether the 2-player count of regular Yokohama means that Yokohama Duel is still needed. And we'll see. But I did enjoy it itself for what it is. So for instance, if you are only playing 2-player games for the most part, I would absolutely recommend Yokohama Duel, as long as you don't mind that having to deal with people constantly kind of blocking you out of what you're doing. Now, if you have never played Yokohama in any form, it's essentially a worker placement game where you're going out into spaces on a board, and when you do that, you kind of block other players from taking those actions often, and you're sort of accumulating different resources to fulfill different orders, and you're scoring points for completing those orders. And you're also building buildings on the board. Buildings will give you little extra bonuses and incentives if you are building them on places that you're going all the time. But generally, it's this kind of like tight worker placement game where you're getting resources and trying to fulfill orders, and also there's some bonus cards and things that you can buy for points as well. So it is a fun, tight little worker placement game. It is a definitely like this very kind of head-to-head struggle. But I did really enjoy Yokohama Duel Deluxified. I'm excited to play it again. I'm excited to play Yokohama Deluxified, which I also got through the same campaign, to see how they compare. But yeah, so I like that one. So that brings us to the end of kind of this video proper. I did want to give a little sort of production update for the channel and let you know what's kind of coming. I haven't published any videos in the last almost 2 weeks, and as I said, it was because we've been very busy with a new puppy. So let me tell you a few things here in terms of what's coming, and then I'm gonna share some cute puppy videos for you to close out this video. Okay, so first thing that's gonna happen is the next couple of weeks is hopefully going to see me catch up on these older first impressions videos that I wanna get finished. And there are about a dozen of those. So again, I anticipate those getting put out over the next 2 to 3 weeks. And the first one will be for Rococo Deluxe Edition. I've already filmed that one, so that's going to get edited and posted hopefully today or tomorrow. I have a few other ones where I've kind of already played the games. They're kind of in various states of getting produced, and that includes like Seastead, Curious Cargo, and Yokohama Duel. I'm going to be very excited to play Kanban EV soon, and I'll be getting a video out for that. And then I also have a first impressions video to get made for Waste Knights 2nd Edition, which is this very cool post-apocalyptic narrative exploration type game set in Australia, and Lost Ruins of Arnak. That'll probably be in the mix somewhere in there. And then other than those games, there's another half dozen or so. So once I've finished with those 12 or so first impressions videos, from then on, you will only see first impressions videos being produced for games that just delivered their Kickstarter or just showed up at retail. And they'll probably be made less frequently. What that means is I will have more time to be making full teach and review videos. So at that point, after the next 2 or 3 weeks, you'll probably see, I don't know, maybe 3, 4 full teach and review videos getting put out every week. My goal is to do 5 videos a week, and I'm kind of slowly working up to that while dealing with some other real life things. So after those dozen or so first impressions videos come out, There's kind of two things I'll be focusing on a little bit. One is I do need to get some better camera equipment, some lighting in here, and that'll definitely be happening after that, not before. I also have a room upstairs that has probably 2/3 of my games in it, including all my heavier games, which are the ones that I prefer. And my intention is to eventually start shooting up there. So as time goes on, my filming space probably will be shifting eventually to that room. And then somewhere around that time, once I'm in the new studio space and I have new equipment, probably around that time I'll also launch a Patreon. And then anyone who wants to help support the channel and my ability to continue making these sorts of videos in the future will be able to do that through Patreon. But for those things, we're probably talking, those are 3 to 6 months in the future at that point. Anyway, that's what's coming up in the near future for the channel. More first impressions videos after a few weeks, a balance of first impressions videos of really new games with teach and review videos, and then kind of upgrading camera equipment, production value, and perhaps a more interesting studio space. So once again, thank you very much for spending some time with me and watching this video. If you'd like to subscribe, you can do that now. You can also like the video. You can hit the alarm bell if you'd like to be notified of videos I publish in the future. And as we go out here, enjoy some puppy videos. And I will see you next time. Bye. So this is a special delivery puppy right here. He's eating, he's still chewing. So you can see he's very cute. He looks like a stuffed animal who came to life. And he is just the greatest little puppy ever. And this is him. His name is Westley. My fiance's favorite movie is The Princess Bride, so he is named after Westley. It's a little hard to see his eyes sometimes and all that fur. Kind of hides his eyes. Let's see, hold on. There's the puppy. Yeah, I'm not holding him that well. There you go. There's the puppy. Okay, he wants to go down. So he's going to go down to the floor, and we're going to roll some tape of puppy video right now.
You can come. Come in. Okay. You can come in. Come in. He's a good boy. Yeah, good boy. Good boy. Such a cute face. Such a cute face. He's a little puppy. You're so cute. Half is such a little treat, and it takes him forever. Okay, go show us your little wiggle. Yes, baby.
Yeah, get it, Wesley. Push it over. There you go. Yeah, good boy. Good boy. Try it again. You did it right. There you go. Oh, good boy. Yeah. Hi there. Hi. Yeah, hello there.